welcome everybody to a Ask Me Anything. This is our first time doing this. Super excited. And who else would I have other than my good friend, Erika Galentin? Thank you so much for joining us, Erika. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy being here, and chatting with you is always a pleasure.
Yeah, and we just hung out at the Great Lakes Herb Fair, but
That
now we
was
get to
so
hang out
fun.
again virtually. Yep. I'm stoked
Yeah.
to publish that Herbalist Hour interview that we did.
Oh yeah, that was good fun. That was good fun.
So Erika Galentin is the lead creatrix, clinical herbalist, grower, distiller, educator, clinical mentor, and product maker over at Sovereignty Herbs. Her home base and medicine gardens are located just outside of Athens, Ohio, but she serves a national and international community with her renowned herbs and wellness coaching, online and in-person classes and workshops, and clinical mentorship programs. She holds a degree in herbal medicine from the University of Wales, Cardiff, UK, and Scottish School of Herbal Medicine in Glasgow, the UK. She is a professional member of the National Institute of Medical Herbalists and registered herbalist member of the American Herbalist Guild. You can learn more about Erika and her work at sovereigntyherbs.com. And not sure how much you plug this, Erika, or not, but you can also subscribe to her podcast called the Herbal Sensorium on your
Yep.
podcast player of choice. So thanks once again, Erika, for joining us. Thanks to y'all for joining us as well. And if anyone has any questions to get things kicked off, otherwise I'll just read one of the audience submitted questions ahead of time, which I think I'll do just to kind of get it going here. So Laura S asks from our email subscribers, I would ask, what is something you would tell to your younger herbalist self just starting out in practice? Hindsight is 2020, and I'd like to know what Erika feels like was one of the more beneficial things she learned. Do you want me to reread that? I feel like I stumbled through
No,
that.
I think I've got it. In fact, that question gives me chills. I think about sending back good messages to my younger herbalist self big time. And I have these images of coming straight out of my degree program and jumping straight into clinical practice. And just I think what I would say, there's a few things I would say to my younger self. First of all is I don't really think you become a good herbalist by studying herbalism and graduating from a program. I think you become a good clinical herbalist by actually practicing. And that it's okay to start small. It's okay to stay within your comfort zones. Okay, another thing I would probably say is figure out who your ideal client is right away. And don't feel like you have to take on every single client that walks through your door if it's not a good fit for you. It's an easy road to burnout. And then I think the third thing that I will say is, well, there's probably more things than three. Okay, younger Erika, really value your work in the world, and don't be afraid to ask for compensation in exchange for your time. Your time is the most precious resource you have, and it is valuable. And it's okay to charge for your services. That doesn't make you a naughty, bad, immoral herbalist. I think I could keep going, but I think those were three good messages I would send back to my younger self.
Love that. That's a perfect question to get us kicked off here too. All right, so we got a couple questions coming in from the live audience now. Julia is asking, if someone has low thyroid, what would be some of the herbs to explore for that?
Okay, so this is a really, really important question. And I think it's important because for me, it highlights a philosophy of clinical practice that I'd like to speak to. And one of the core beliefs or core values that I have in my clinical work is that herbs don't treat problems. Herbs can support bodies in overcoming their own challenges, or assist bodies in being as well as they can, even in the face of challenges like low thyroid. But the second that we start centering herbs as solutions to problems, I think that they start to lose their efficacy and their value, because herbs are not like drugs. They don't work in the body like drugs do. The body doesn't work with the herbs the way that it works with drugs. And so when we start to think about something like a wellness challenge, like thyroid or low thyroid function, I think that we have to zoom out and look at all of the other pieces and parts that are going on in that person's life, where we can offer support and where ease can be created. And, maybe that's supporting the thyroid with herbs and thyroid function with herbs. But I think that that's really going to depend on the client. And so, for example, not every client is going to benefit from ashwagandha. Not every client is going to benefit from taking seaweed. There's a way that we have to sort of dive in and look at that the personal experiences that person is having with that condition and work from there. I also feel like, getting your head around whether this is low thyroid function sort of as a general natural manifestation of something like the menopause transition, or is this a Hashimoto's autoimmune sort of situation? All these things are going to change the approach that we take clinically. And so the philosophy of practice that I have, which I'm actually going to be teaching a class on probably in December, is really based around this idea of not using herbs to treat problems. How can we reframe clinical herbal practice where herbs become tools for the body to overcome its own challenges? So I know it's not a great straight linear answer, like A plus B equals C, but that's not herbalism. It doesn't work that way. But hopefully that's been helpful in some capacity.
We'll talk about this later, but the herbal practice connection is the class that you're going to be teaching later on. Is that going to be through that, or is it going to be something standalone?
Both, actually. Yeah,
okay.
totally. It'll be through HPX, but also standalone, just in case people don't want to sign up for Herbal Practice Connection, which you should, because it's awesome.
Herbal Practice Connection with an X.
.com.
All right. So Gabrielle asks, is it better to focus on treating a specific age group or do something like family medicine and serve all ages? Where, books or teachers, is it best to learn about treating geriatric clients?
Well, I think, Gabrielle, what's going to be really helpful for you is to really kind of hone in and focus on, what population of people do you as an herbalist want to work with? Like, do you want to work with everybody, or do you want to focus and specialize in working with elder care? One of the business strategies that I often talk about in the Herbal Practice Connection and with my mentees is this idea of, being able to get very clear about who your ideal client population is, because in that way you can focus your, for lack of a better word, your marketing efforts and your outreach efforts in that group. And you can become really good at working with that population and that age bracket, regardless of what their underlying health and wellness issues may be. So, just focusing on, working with elders is a really great starting place for your clinical practice focus. So don't be afraid to kind of get specific like that. And then as far as, really great books for working with elders, I think there's probably several, but there's one in particular by David Hoffman. It was written quite a while ago. But I think, I believe it's like the Elder's Herbal is what it's called. I think that's probably it. I also think that it's worthwhile, kind of looking at, what types of elder situations are you wanting to work in? Are you wanting to do more palliative, supportive work, in outside of hospice? Or do you want to work with folks who have chronic illness or nutritional issues? Or are you wanting to work with sort of more of a marginalized socioeconomic genre of elder folks? So really kind of depending on where you want to focus your clinical attention, there's all kinds of books available about, elders' bodies. I think, two of the things that I can say is that, the elder population definitely has more oftentimes it's going to be, coming into your clinical reality with a potentially quite a long list of pharmaceutical medications. And so you're going to want to make sure that you can work confidently, especially, with a really good sound knowledge base surrounding herb drug interactions and what the mechanisms are there. And so I would suggest that you focus on taking a few classes. I have one as well I could plug for that. That you take a few classes, on herb drug interactions and what the mechanisms are, so you feel pretty confident with that. That might be a good idea. And that the other thing to remember is that, as the body ages, our capacity for cellular renewal slows down. And so, this is kind of where I think herbal medicine can be so absolutely vital, in supporting overall vitality. I mean, vital vitality. But I also think that nutrition, especially with the elderly population, nutrition and digestion are often going to be kind of potential challenges to them feeling well also. And so you may want to look into, looking at like a really good solid nutrition course might be super helpful for you. And also making sure that you feel really confident about supporting digestive vigor. So those are some general ideas.
Do you teach nutrition at all, Erika?
I not as standalone, I don't know, but there's some really great nutrition programs out there. You're welcome, Gabrielle.
So Sherry's asking, why did you choose to study herbalism overseas?
Sherry. That's a really good question. Bless you, Sherry. Love you, by the way. She's one of my biggest cheerleaders in the world. So it's funny, I was just at the Great Lakes Herb Fair, and I was sitting down talking to Seven Song about this very exact thing, because he actually asked me this question as well. And my answer is, back when I decided that I wanted to become a clinical herbalist and actually work with clients one-on-one, it was about 2001. In the United States. And I was in Eugene, Oregon. And although there were some really great herbalism programs that were starting to crop up, nothing was online. And as far as like taking classes online or anything like that. And there was, for me, I come from a very academic background. Academics has always been a big part of my identity. It also has been a very big part of how I, kind of internally validate how I'm spending my time and my energy, or how I internally validate my career, my work, my path, or whatever. And so I became aware of the university level programs that were available in the United Kingdom at the time. And I was privileged enough to be able to figure out a way to jump across the pond and go to school there, which was really amazing, because once I got in on that student visa, I was able to work as well full time while I was in school. And my program, my university program, only cost £3,500 a year. So think about that. In addition to clinical fees and books and all the other things. So tuition wasn't actually that bad. And I left with a 4-year degree in herbal medicine. I left with 4 years of clinical hours. And for me, that was the sort of the rigor that I needed, the academic rigor that I needed to feel confident, kind of stepping out into my work in the world. And so that would be my answer for that question. I mean, and since I graduated from my degree program in 2006, there have been many universities over in the United Kingdom that have since stopped their herbal medicine degree programs. And mostly that has to do with the fact that there was going to be statutory regulation for herbalists, and then it didn't go through, and the university couldn't just consider to keep funding these programs. And so a lot of the programs fell apart, which is very sad. But there's a few other programs that have cropped up in the meantime, and one of them is actually entirely online, and that's the Heartwood Herbal Education. I think it's Heartwood Herbalism or Heartwood Herbal something. if you want, you can message me for more information about that.
Awesome. So just to let you know, we only have one question left in the live webinar right now. So don't feel compelled like you have to ask a question. We have tons of questions from social media and whatnot. And it's interesting. I feel like since we put that out there to the audience, now I'm wondering if that's why a lot of people didn't show up, because they're just like, well, I already asked the question. Now I don't need to show up live. But yeah, we had 200 something people register for the event. So anyways, that's all good.
Well,
So,
I'll speak to that. We
yeah.
all need to start showing up in person. I think that this whole watch the recording later is a huge, I know that it's easier for most people, but like there's something to say about like making the time and dedicating the time to show up in person. I feel like that speaks volumes, and, you know, I think it's good, you know, and that way you're not like just collecting recordings that you're never going to listen to.
Good point. Have you heard Camille Freeman's podcast episode on that exact topic?
I freaking love her.
Yeah, she's great.
We're singing the same tune with that for sure.
Totally. Well, we still do have a question from Julia, who's joining us right now. I want to become, and this is a doozy, this is a good one. I want to become a clinical herbalist. I just don't know the steps to getting to that point. You want to lay out the steps?
Wow. I wish it were that easy. Okay. Step 1, pick up the machete. Step 2, start cutting through the brush, find your way. No, I'm just kidding.
Totally.
I mean, okay. So I think, you know, step 1 for me would be, in my opinion, I mean, I think that there are many paths. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to caveat. There are many paths to becoming an herbalist and working one-on-one with clients. From like through my lens, my worldview and my lens, I would suggest, or I would say, you know, the path that I took myself has been a successful one. And so I can offer up, you know, the idea of investing in an herbalism education that has a clinical focus. So maybe you've kind of already just done, like you've been doing intro, maybe you're focused on self-study, and you really want to go through a self-study path, and that's totally okay. But you want to start bringing in, you know, the anatomy, the physiology, the pathophysiology. How does the body work in health and disease? Really getting clear with medical sciences. What are your red flags? And then taking as many clinical programs or clinical classes as you can. If you're not able to invest in an actual, like, you know, multiple year clinical program, I would, you know, definitely suggest, you know, once you get through or partway through, or even through the clinical program, that you find yourself a really awesome mentor. Someone who's actually working also with clients, and that is going to be able to let you sit in on their clinic, and vice versa, also potentially be able to show up, you know, for your clients, you know, especially if it's an online situation, so that you have some feedback when you start to work one-on-one with clients. I definitely think that, you know, having a solid ground in medical sciences, and obviously your mat med, your materia medica, and your energetics, and, you know, your pharmacology and things like that, is really like having that ground to stand on can launch you into actually getting those clinical hours and getting that experience working with a mentor, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say, you know, I know that not everybody feels like it's like the end all be all, going for the RH membership with the American Herbalist Guild. But I feel like, not that it's the end all be all, but I find in particular that they have a really, really clearly laid out education path for what you could call yourself a clinical herbalist, you know, having finished that. And so I would definitely check out what the requirements are to apply for a registered herbalist membership with the American Herbalist Guild, because I think that will give you sort of like a framework for what you're kind of looking for, from my perspective, from my lens. And, you know, I will say this too, you know, that the RH membership, you know, for me is a really special one, because not only does it represent sort of a standard of education, but I also really believe in this idea of, my clients being able to hold me accountable to, and me being able to hold myself accountable to something like a structure that is greater than myself in my own ruminations and my own business. And so, what the RH membership does, for me is there's a community there, but there's also, a pretty strict code of ethics that, I can adhere to, and that I can also point my clients to and say, hey, if I mess up, or you feel like, I've done something unethical, you can call me out for that. You can complain to the American Herbalist Guild, and they have a really great intact grievance process, which, again, I just think it's about accountability as well. So I kind of just went on like a whole tour right there, but I'll say that if you go to the American Herbalist Guild website, which I know that they're currently working on, it's kind of a work in progress. There's a new website being worked on as we speak. That the RH sort of recommendations are going to be a really good sort of framework or guideline, I think, for kind of framing your herbal education to step into that clinical realm. Yeah.
Yeah. So Julia says mentorship, like second step. I'm thinking Camille Freeman, she has something like that. So yeah, she does have a mentorship program, as does Erika. That's the Herbal Practice Connection, from what I can understand. But when I was taking the Columbine School of Botanical Studies, I did the 2-year apprenticeship where we would go out in the field and we'd botanize and we'd learn herbalism and all of that. But then after the apprenticeship, Howie actually does have like the clinical mentorship. How important is it from your perspective, Erika, for someone to study with someone in person in the clinic with them side by side? And then I guess dovetailing off that, is your mentorship, the Herbal Practice Connection, kind of like a step beyond that, or how do you see all that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like times are changing.
Yeah.
And I think that how we model herbal practice is also changing. There's no doubt value in sitting in somebody's clinic in person. I mean, the 4 years I spent with the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, the University of Wales, I was in clinic in person with clients in the room, and my supervisor in the room. And that is just an invaluable experience. And so if you can find in-person clinical hours, I would fly to the moon and back to get some of those under your belt. But I also feel like, because the practice, for me, the business of clinical herbal practice has changed. The role of the herbalist in people's lives is changing. And so, with that, I feel like the online environment is also a really wonderful and successful and even intimate opportunity to sit in and get clinical hours. My entire clinical practice is currently online, and it is working out beautifully based on the way that I practice as an herbalist. And so I'll just say that I've got three sort of mentorship. Let me just mute my emails. I've got 3 mentorship sort of opportunities, and they kind of scale. So the big one is the Clinical Foundations mentorship. And this is something that's actually starting October 1st. I've got a full cohort this year. I only take on 5 students a year. That's a 6-month program. And in that 6 months, you are sitting in on the Ohio Free Herbal Clinic, which I run here out of Ohio. And then I also sit in on, you're responsible for getting clients, and we use Sovereignty Herbs platform. And I also sit in on your consultations. In addition, you get, membership to the Herbal Practice Connection, where I do case reviews. We do workshops surrounding clinical topics. There's specialty training surrounding clinical topics. We have group meetings, I call them pep talks in there. And so you get clinical hours. You get, up to 50 clinical hours in that 6 months. It's pretty intense. And it's enough to kind of start you on your path, or to give you a chunk of time that you can then, move into a program like Camille's, or Camille's program. You finish her, she does her mentorship Mondays. You could potentially do both. It depends on really what you're going for there. The Ohio Free Herbal Clinic, sitting in on that clinic is really pretty hardcore. It's fully booked every month, and You actually get to sit in with students from the UK and abroad, because I also mentor for the National Institute of Medical Herbalists. And so it's a really rich clinical learning environment. I have a lot of fun with that. I really enjoy it a lot. And so there is that, those options. The second kind of mentorship that I offer is another 6-month program. And that launches in March, and that's the business of clinical herbal practice, where we're focusing less on like the ins and outs of how to be a clinician and how to, model your clinical work, into, okay, how do you turn this into a business where you can actually make a living doing this work? Because I think, sorry to burst everybody's bubble, but clinical practice is a business. And there are lots of intricacies and irregularities and all kinds of things that you don't know when you don't know because you don't know. And so that launches in March, and it's also sort of, you get the Herbal Practice Connection membership with that as well. So then there's just the standalone Herbal Practice Connection, which is, $34.99 a month, and you get, one really solid event a week, whether that's a pep talk with the group, or a workshop, like it's kind of like a lecture class that I teach. I also do case review there, and then once a month we get specialty trainers in to kind of do really great subjects. Like this month is Lindsay Feldposh, and she's going to be doing herbal formulation. And then next month is Camille Freeman's coming in. She's doing a writing and thinking workshop. How do we write about our work in the world to really connect authentically with our clients? And then Stephen Yeager's coming in November. He's going to be teaching CGMP for dispensing herbalists. So things like that. And you get all of this for, $34.99 a month. Plus you get this really awesome, supportive, loving, fabulous community of folks. So it's quite a cool, like if you're not ready to commit to clinical hours, but you want to kind of keep your hand in the clinical world, and you want to, collaborate with clinical people, and you want to start thinking like a clinician, Herbal Practice Connection is awesome. And I've got Sherry. Sherry's one of my members, and she's really loving it. Yeah, I think. I mean, she's still there.
Well, she's here too, so she probably loves it. What a guest lineup. Yeah, I got to have Lindsay Feldposh on the show eventually.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Nice to catch up with her at the Great Lakes Fair.
Did you sip any of her potions?
Yeah, she gave us some I don't know, mimosa thing in the morning one day, but yeah, it was delicious.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving right along here, Brittany asks, as a very part-time clinical herbalist myself, and now also a licensed addiction counselor, do you have any suggestions or ideas about how I can combine these two?
Okay, this is a tough one. I think one of the first things that I would say is that you really need to be clear about the boundaries of your license and what it is you can and cannot do. And your licensing organization is going to be pretty clear. And if it's not clear, that you contact them and you say to them, hey, I also practice clinical herbalism, and I want to be able to integrate my services into kind of I'm not sure what your plan would be, and talk to them and just, see if that's a hard no, or if they have any suggestions or advice for you. Because one of the things about clinical herbalism being unlicensed, it's still very difficult often to get to sort of make any headway in combining an unlicensed modality into a licensed profession. Most of the licensed professions, it's not allowed, and you could potentially lose your license. So just to get really clear about where those boundaries are first, that would be my suggestion. And then a second suggestion I might have would be, thinking about, okay, so, even though it can be very difficult to like compartmentalize and put, addiction recovery counseling into, one Tupperware container and, clinical herbalism into another, I think that, it can be very, it can be very important that you I think for the sake of your license, sure that you offer those services separate from one another. And that if you are working with a client who is a recovering addict, and wants to pursue herbalism to support themselves, that you do that under its own Tupperware container, right? And that you don't necessarily call it, herbalism and addiction recovery, or maybe you can, maybe that would be okay with your license, but to not have them be blended into one session, but more to say, okay, if you want to work with herbs, you're going to need to book in with me as a clinical herbalist, and we'll focus on working with you in that capacity, knowing that addiction is part of your narrative and part of your story. And so you're never really backed into this corner of, and I would say this to any licensed profession, you're not backed into this corner of using herbalism to treat, addiction. Right. Because that's where you could start to, I think, end up with some legal issues and loss of licensure and all of that. But it's a really great question. I hope that was helpful or orientating in some way, or not orienting in some way.
Great answer. Okay. So Gabrielle asks, what's a good way to approach someone to ask them to be my mentor? And what should their credentials be to be considered a solid mentor?
Oh, this is a really good question. I want to say that, credentials are credentials. And, while they can sometimes be very meaningful, sometimes they're not. And I think that if you're wanting to work with a clinical mentor, that there's, it's really great to, I can say that a good starting place, honestly, is looking at other than reaching out to me, I'm super friendly and I don't bite. Or reaching out to Camille because she's super friendly and she doesn't bite, or my friend and colleague, Mel Castine. She does a lot of mentorship work as well. And she's really friendly and she doesn't bite. And we love to hear from students that are like, hey, I want to work with you. It's great when we hear from you. We're like, yay, this is excellent. This is why we do what we do. So I think step one, don't be afraid to reach out. I think the second thing is, credentials are, do some investigation and see what you feels legitimate to you and feels good to you, and what you feel you need as a student to build trust and to feel trust towards your mentor. Because I think that the mentorship relationship is one of mutual trust and respect. And you want to be able to, and to be able to, hold boundaries, and to be able to make sure your boundaries are not, crossed, and all of these other things that go into building a relationship. You want to make sure that this person feels okay for you, that, it feels like a safe and supportive and legitimate learning environment. And I feel like only you can really make a judge of that. And so, most mentors, I think, I could be wrong about this, are willing to speak with folks prior to them making any sort of financial or otherwise work trade commitment. So, reach out and say hello and ask if it would be okay to, spend 20 minutes having a quick conversation. Get your, I call it your red light system. Get your red light system ready to go, and if it's a red light, don't go. If it's a green light, go. If it's a yellow light, put it on the maybe list. And, spend a little bit of time. I think it's kind of like, I say this about finding a good therapist, or, it's kind of like finding a pair of shoes that do the job and are comfortable and don't hurt your feet and can last a while. And sometimes it takes trying on a few pairs to find the right fit. And so, don't be afraid to just reach out. And most mentors I know are willing to have kind of, onboarding chats. So I know that I am anyway. So you can see whether or not I'm your kind of person, or if you feel like I would be a safe person for you to work with, or I'm legitimate enough based on your standards, or whatever that may be. I think the last thing I'll say is that, if you go to the American Herbalist Guild website, they do have a find a mentor. They have a listing for all of the registered herbalists with the guild that are currently accepting mentees. And so if you wanted a good starting place to just kind of see who's out there and what they're offering, you could look through that. I'll say caveat, if when you come to my name, I'm not quite sure if I've updated my information there yet. So it's quite possible that there's others on that list that could probably say the same. And so I would just, don't take what you read 100%, maybe just reach out to them and just check out and see if they're still accepting mentees. That would be my suggestion there.
Great suggestions. All right. So we ran out of some audience questions, unless I'm mistaken. Oh, we got another one in.
Yeah.
All right. So Julia's asking, have you ever heard of Urban Moonshine Herbal Course? That's the one that I'm working on right now.
I can't say that I've heard that they have a course, but I can't say that I could speak to it at all. I'm not familiar with it whatsoever. I know that, Guido Massé, if he's involved in any capacity, it's probably great. I know that he still, is with the Vermont Center of Integrative Herbalism as well, which is also a really stellar program. So I'm not quite sure if I could speak to the Urban Moonshine course at all, but it sounds fun.
Yeah. I didn't know they had a course at all, but yeah, like you said, I'll second Guido Massé for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's ask a question from our text message community. And this is from Tommy W. And they ask, if someone doesn't like tinctures or liquid remedies, what would be a better alternative for potency? Are capsules a comparable alternative? And if so, how would we determine a proper dosing schedule and timeline for someone?
Okay. Woo. Okay. And we go left. Yeah. So this is an interesting question. This does come up, in my clinical work. I even have in my clinical form, I have a question surrounding sensitivities to alcohol, whether they be religious, behavioral, et cetera, or otherwise. And, can you reasonably consume herbal extracts produced with alcohol? So I make sure up front with my clients that I'm aware of whether or not they can actually, take alcoholic extracts or not, because that is for me that is the primary form of herbal blends that I blend. I've got my dispensary here behind door number 2. And so I definitely focus on tincture blends. I also do I do aqueous extracts. So I do a lot of infusions, especially long overnight infusions and I spend a lot of time curating the herbs that I bring into my apothecary. I'm focused very predominantly on American herb farmers, things that were grown this season, and very picky about that. And so if I can't get a person, I'm taking you through my logic here before we get to capsules, but if I cannot get a person to utilize tinctures, for me, the next step is actually working with infusions and teas. And I have to say that even though a person doesn't, quote unquote, like to take teas, I think that there's some coaching that we can do as herbalists to support a person and engaging with that type of care. And I'm going to say this because the act of making yourself tea and drinking that tea is a profound act of empathy towards the body. And if we can, as herbalists, support and coach people into that space of body empathy, the healing work can really begin for them. And so, even though I might get some pushback from clients about no, I just want to swallow capsules, I will say that, well, sometimes the efficacy or the effectiveness of herbs is in the taking of them. and that process of bringing them into the body in a really sort of cognizant way, which could even be brewed real quick and chug, but it's still this profound act of body empathy. And so I would say that if you have someone that's like absolutely adamant about not drinking infusions, herbal infusions, but they're happy to take capsules, that there's some room for coaching there, that you might be able to get them to shift a little bit. And, start with simples, start simply. Don't give them a huge complicated formula that tastes like crap. Start with something that can entice them in. I will also say too, that I think one of the downfalls of capsules, there's a few, and one of them is that you can't ever really taste the herbs. And so, the aromatics are important. The bitters can be important. The sweetness can be important. So, the idea of taking herbs, it also is the tasting of them, I think, is also part of their medicinal support. And so to kind of streamline that and jump straight to capsules, we're already missing, two very important features of taking herbs internally. So my view on capsules is, I mean, they can be absolutely awesome. Okay, they can be absolutely awesome for people who can't, for some whatever reason, stomach the tea, right? We're getting to that point where teas are not an option either. Here we are, capsules. And so a few things, like you have to get the quantity in grams as you would, and I'm going metric here because a gram and a mil are pretty much equivalent, right? So you have to get the equivalent of grams into the body that you would get based on the extract you are using, whether that be a tincture or a tea. And, of milliliters, you have to get the same amount or the same dose of the plants, which means that you are going to be having that client swallow a ton of capsules in order to get that effective dose. A ton. If you are making these yourself, which bless your heart if you are, because making capsules can be a real pain in the tuchus. This is an incredibly expensive process. And if you're dispensing and producing capsules out of your own dispensary, it is very time consuming, and your time is also, is valuable and has monetary value. And so by the time you do the math, and I have on capsules, you're going to be upside down. It is definitely going to be a drain on your clinical practice if you're thinking it from a business perspective. So that being said, if you are not going to be making capsules yourself, your next bet is to then suggest capsules that are being made by other companies. And what I would suggest in that regard is that you actually just follow the instructions on the bottle. So you make the suggestion, hey, try this, Gaia herbs, hawthorn extract in capsules, follow the instructions on the label. And I feel like, as not getting into a mathematics lesson on how to do capsule math, I think that's probably what I can say about the capsule question.
Very thorough answer. I want to say one of the first herbal remedies I made when I first started working at Mountain Rose Herbs was turmeric capsules. And then I never did that again. So
that
yeah. All right. So we got some more live webinar questions. This one's from Ash. And Ash asks, okay, how do you respond when clients want to make their own herbal remedies after you make your recommendations? Do you give them recipes? I have people ask me where do I get my herbs from.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's like two perspectives I have on this. I'll just share because I'm honest and I'll just put myself out there. So my first perspective, which is true to my values and my ethics, is that, herbalism and using herbs is this incredibly beautiful journey into loving relationship with the body. And the more that we can get our clients to invest their time into this relationship, I think the more healing can happen for them, the more healing they can direct in their own lives. And so we're putting these tools and these opportunities into people's hands to do what they want to do. I have clients that sometimes will say, hey, I already have, whatever, a couple of ounces of St. John's wort. Can you send me a blend that would have that has the St. John's wort in it? Well, that is formulated with St. John's wort in it, and I'll just put this in when it arrives. Sure, no problem. Absolutely. I have clients who are farmers and plant people, and they're very interested in being able to create their own formulas and to create their own tinctures and extracts. And so they come to me for the suggestions of like, okay, where can I put all of my attention and energy? Like, what should I be making? And I will happily share with them my tincture making process from both fresh and dry, and get excited about sharing that with them. I think that it's also, for me, really wonderful when I can share my sources with other people. Especially if I am supporting American herb farmers. And so I often have clients will ask me like, well, where can I get, where could I get a pound of that fresh? And I'll be like, well, here are the farms that I order from. I'm sure they would be happy to talk to you about sending you a fresh pound if they've got it, or, be on the lookout for pre-order in the winter, or like in the early spring. Because again, in that regard, not only am I supporting my client, but I'm also supporting all of these epic American herb farmers that are out there like doing the good work. So I do feel really good about sharing the how-to and do-it-yourself perspectives. I think the other side of this is, I know that I can't control for error if there is error out there, and the client harvests something that's not right, or I can't control for these factors and the error. So part of being able to custom blend for my clients gives me the opportunity to make sure that they are actually ingesting what I've suggested they should ingest. And so I can't control for client error, but I do have a clause in my informed consent and disclosure, which really is very clear about this. If you don't have to buy herbs from me, should you choose to get them out elsewhere or to source your herbs in other ways, the liability is your own. I'm pretty clear about that in my paperwork up front. So I'm not creating any gray area for myself or my business. And then the other thing I'll say too, because clinical practice is a business, your dispensary can be a very important revenue stream in your business. And it can be really difficult sometimes to have a client say to you, oh, I'd rather do this myself, when that you could be potentially earning income from, supplying them with herbs, and that may work or look better financially for you. If you end up working with a population of individuals that tend to want to do their own and create their own and make their own blends and all of these other things, I would just caution you to maybe, factor that into your pricing schedule with your consultations, so that you are creating a little bit of a buffer for yourself there and maybe not so much of a loss. But at the end of the day, I'll just go back to like my first value, which is, the more that people can do to be proactive in building relationship with their body, the better. And so for me, if that means making tinctures yourself and doing blends yourself, awesome. That's what we need. That's what we need.
It's good practical advice, Erika.
Thanks.
Yeah. So more webinar questions. Josh is asking, curious what kind of insurance you have for liability, and also what company provides your insurance. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that depends on what kind of insurance you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking about, your general liability, which is, things like fire and theft, and then of course your slip and fall insurance, that's one question. And the other question would be if you're actually referring to professional liability insurance, and that's your errors and omissions insurance, also sometimes known as malpractice insurance, or if you're talking about product liability insurance. And that's really surrounding something going wrong with your herbal blends or products that you're selling through your business. And so there are these three different sort of insurance conundrums that as unlicensed professionals we have to consider. This is something that I definitely talk a lot about in my program, The Business of Clinical Herbal Practice. And he's saying here, okay, I mean the practitioner malpractice insurance. Okay. So there's not really a lot of options available to clinical herbalists for practitioner liability insurance. There is an option available if you become a registered herbalist member of the American Herbalist Guild. We do have access to some coverage through that membership. There's a third-party provider that is kind of grandfathered us into their okay list. We will insure you list. But outside of that, I think there's maybe only one or two other options that I have heard about that I've not really spent any time investigating. But one of the things that I'll say is, there's a real philosophical issue here when it comes to practitioner liability insurance and this idea of errors and omissions and malpractice, right? My goal and everything that I do is to not cause harm. And everything that I do in the journey of when my client first arrives to my website, all the way into our first session, all the way through in perpetuity for how long we end up working together, is all about building trust and is all about putting safety first. I have pretty substantial and thorough systems in place to make sure that the client is very clear about expectations. The client's very clear that I am not a licensed professional. I mean, I am a professional, but I don't carry any license, that there's no oversight for my profession, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My informed consent disclosure form is pretty rock solid. And in the signing of that form, there is a release, a waiver of responsibility. They are releasing me of liability based on the choices and decisions that they make as a result of my suggestions. I also have a very thorough client onboarding process whereby I am very, very particular about who it is I will work with privately. My free clinic is another story that's open to anybody. But my private practice, there is quite an onboarding process that I go through to make sure that the relationship between client and practitioner is safe for both parties. That is front and center. And so this is a really quick and dirty way of saying that I think I do not believe that practitioner liability insurance is as critical for clinical herbalists as it is for other licensed professionals. And if you want to know more about my perspectives on this matter, you should join the Herbal Practice Connection or consider my Business of Clinical Herbal Practice mentorship, which starts in March. How's that? I hope that's okay.
Oops, I took my video away. That's a great answer. I didn't realize that being a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, you had that option to have some sort of insurance, but everything else you said made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. All right, Brittany is asking, do you have any suggestions for increasing your clinical practice and sustaining it? What is your standard rate to charge for an initial consultation?
Okay, so this is sort of a marketing question in some ways, which is also part of my business course. But if I'm going to speak from my personal experience, I think what I will say is I have found a few things to be true. Pricing your services as a whole, like there's a whole conversation, there's a whole workflow that you need to go through, I think, in order to figure out what price point is going to work for you. And one of the best pieces of advice I have ever gotten is actually from one of my mentors, because I have several mentors myself. And my piece of advice, the piece of advice that I got that I really felt was wonderful is, charge what you need to earn, not what you can afford. Right? I know that seems super capitalist, but I mean, that's the society we're living in, and everything's really super expensive, right? So, charge what it is that you need to earn, not what you could afford. So there's a piece. Another piece is, there's quite a few sliding scale models out there that are really quite beautiful in providing people the opportunity to pay it forward. So the pay from the heart model, where you can have, you pay what you can from your heart. You have a standard sort of middle price, but you can then offer a discount price, and then you can also offer a pay it forward price. That kind of system can be super helpful as well. And then you're not necessarily just pricing your consultations on one figure. You have the opportunity to be flexible with people. I think payment plans are a really great idea. And thinking about how you could structure payment plans to help people, for things to be more affordable. I think that a lot of folks right now are really doing better with like budgeting monthly than, budgeting one sum at a time. And I'm not going to give you any, straight up answers. You can see what I charge on my website. But I think that, a lot of it, if you're brand new to clinical practice, I think that, it's something to say for having, I've got over 17 years of clinical experience, and I feel there's a lot of value there. And so I charge for that value. And that my prices may not reflect the same sorts of price ranges that you might want to charge if you're just starting out, for example. But again, this is something that I talk a lot about in my business mentorship. I think the last thing I'll say is that from my personal experience, so the way that I used to practice is I would charge for one-off consultations. I would, your first consultation would be an hour and a half, and I would charge X. Follow-up consultations would be an hour, and I would charge X. And then I would do you could schedule just a 30-minute check-in, and I'll charge this amount. And that these were sort of one-off scheduling options that people had. And what I discovered, and maybe this is sort of more of a phenomenon of practicing in the United States and less so a reflection of how I used to practice in the United Kingdom, that I think that you are going to have a lot more financial success, and you're going to end up a lot less burned out if you can figure out how to package your time where you have follow-up visits built into an initial cost. So putting together packages and doing clinical packages, I think, are really, really great. That they provide that it's a commitment, it's a journey that you are on with your client's on with you. You get that follow-up, you get that feedback, you get to witness that person's progression, you get to be present in their wellness journey. It's all way better than when you have one consultation, you do a blend, and the person never shows back up, and you wonder if you killed them, or if they hate you, or if you suck, or all the other things that we tell ourselves. So what I'll say with that too is that from doing like a one-to-one consultations, there's a huge push right now in the wellness industry to really scale that out into group coaching. And I think that in some ways that model of kind of group work can actually be really super beneficial to an herbalist practice, especially if you feel that you have an expertise in a particular area. And so I'm hoping in 2024, I'm starting to build a group coaching program for a very specific population of individuals, because it is sort of what I feel is an expertise of mine. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that scales, and as far as revenue in my business is concerned, but also how that changes, if it will change or benefit the dynamics and the healing journeys of the people that contribute to that program. So I think, so you got your one-offs, you've got packages, and from packages you can scale to group work if you want. That's sort of, that's one possible scenario in many. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, Brittany said, thanks for the thorough answer.
That's what you get with me. Lots
That's right.
of thorough talking.
Love it. Can you repeat that quote from that mentor of yours again?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to charge what it is you need to earn, not what you can afford.
I love that. I don't suppose Christosina Dinas is that mentor. Sounds like
No.
something she would say. Okay.
Does it? No. But you know what? We honestly, her and I have never met before. We're Facebook friends, and we kind of comment on each other's gardens and things. But this one person I would just love to hug.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to schedule an herbalist hour, and it's going to be all us three. Okay.
Yay. Oh my God. I would love that. Yes. Your HerbRally friends are going to be so sick of seeing my face, but I'll do it. I'll do it.
We'll schedule it out. So yeah,
that'd be great.
We'll space it. I love it. All right. Let's do a question from LinkedIn, and this is from Chris M. I really like this one. My question would be, with the rise of clinical herbalism becoming the norm, what are some of the earth-grounded practices that bring you back to the roots of practice within your own personal life or in your practice, meaning traditional, intuitive, folk earth-based herbalism as the roots of practice?
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a statement in a question.
Yeah, totally.
So
do you want me to repeat it?
No, I think I've got it the best I can interpret it, I think.
Sure.
Okay, so again, this is like a philosophy of clinical practice, and this is one that I'm going to be talking about when I teach on this subject in December, which will be online. I have a mentor, another mentor, awesome mentor, who said to me once, Erika, you can only support people in their healing work as far as you have been willing to do that work on yourself. And that's like, boom.
Yeah.
Right? That's boom right there. That is the hot, stinking truth. And, stepping into that reality, as I did several years ago now, has opened up profound doors in my personal experience of just being on this planet, which then reverberate out into my clinical work in the world. And I always talk about how, I came to herbalism for me first. When I was a young person interested in herbs, I came to herbalism because of my own healing journey, my own needs that weren't being met in other realms. And so, one of the grounding practices that I have, okay, and maybe this isn't necessarily folk herbalism, but maybe it is that I see a therapist. I do. I see a therapist every 2 weeks. I have for years. And this is a big part for me of touching base with myself always. And where am I in my healing journey? Where am I screwing up? Where am I challenged? Where am I doing really well? And how does that continue to sort of reverberate out into the space I'm able to hold for my clients? And so, for me, that is a super grounding practice. I also, in a less esoteric sense, spend quite a lot of, as much time as I possibly can with the plants themselves. I know that for many, that's a real privilege to be able to do. And not everybody is, backed into national forests like I am, and has such ease of access to beautiful biodiversity. But, for me, actually having my hands on the earth, my bare feet on the ground around the plants themselves, even if it's just sitting down for a second and watching a bee on a dandelion, take me back into that moment, to that presence and that awe, and that wonder. That is also a big practice of mine. I also do a lot of, sort of plant study and distillation work. And so, I suppose one of my rooted practices is in my ongoing study and research into Goethean science and phenomenology. And so a lot of people aren't familiar with what that is. But it is very much about practicing the art of living thinking. And I do a lot of plant studies and landscape studies which end up in sort of like aromatic distillations that become a part of my sort of spiritual practice in herbalism, and just tending to that as much as I possibly can in my work. In fact, I was really blessed to have just done a really wonderful workshop in East Lothian in Scotland, doing the Essence of Place workshop, where we studied 3 different plants, and kind of within the landscape, and did this kind of larger landscape study, and then we put it all into the still. It was really wonderful because, if I can just share this with you, maybe I already shared this on HerbRally, I don't even know, but it was like the actual distillation essence that we distilled, for whatever reason, ended up smelling like sheep when it came out the other end, which is really amazing because like this place that's in the middle of nowhere, this beautiful piece of land, is surrounded by sheep farms. I mean, it's like, sheep have been reared on for hundreds of years. It's like the sheep are in the land. And so that's what we got out of the still, which was really too many people's chagrin. But to me, it was really exciting because I was like, we did it. We captured the essence of place. So anyway, long story. I feel like attending to that work, that heart path work, is also what keeps me grounded in my clinical practice. So hopefully that was a good answer.
I love it. It's holistic. You got the therapy, hanging with the plants, and then your spiritual practice of creating these essences and whatnot. And what was that one Gandhi story where the mom came to Gandhi and said, "Can you tell my kid not to eat candy?" And he's like, "Sure, come back to me in a week." And she's like, "Why a week?" He's like, "Well, first I got to quit eating candy first, and then I'll be able to tell him."
Yeah.
That reminded me of what you said earlier. So
Yeah. I think that's the truth of it. Now, and that's not to say that like we have to be purist, or that
thank you for
we have to be,
clarifying that.
or that we have to be perfect. Like,
Yeah.
I am absolutely beautifully imperfect in everything that I
Amen.
do.
Yeah.
And as much as I try to like be on top of taking care of myself all of the time, I am falling off wagons just like everybody else. I am in the trenches of all of the challenges, just like my clients, just like everybody else. And so I'm not trying to live in this place of like, oh, I have done this healing work and now I can, heal you in this weird guru kind of way. Like, that's just not even where I'm at. I'm like, cool, you're in the trenches. I'm in the trenches too. Look at this crap all over me. But I can still also, with the knowledge and experience that I have, provide guidance. But to do that authentically, I have to be committed to my own path. I have to be committed to my own work on myself. It doesn't mean that I'm ever going to get there. It doesn't mean I'm ever going to be perfect, or that I'm never going to eat sugar ever again, or whatever it is. It doesn't mean that any of those things for me. It just means that I am on the path. I'm cognizant that I'm on the path, and I'm doing my work as best as I can. I think I wanted to clarify that piece.
It's the best clarification you could have possibly done. So yeah, I love that. It's a great answer. So how are you doing, Erika? We got maybe another 20 minutes or so.
I'm doing great.
All
How are you
right,
doing,
good.
Mason?
Oh, I'm doing good. It's been a lot of fun. If you're watching live, feel free to ask any more questions if you have them. Otherwise, we'll just keep going through these social media questions and whatnot. So here's one from Alex Queetham Payne. Do you know Alex,
I
perchance?
do.
Okay,
Yes,
awesome.
I do know Alex.
Cool. So Alex asks, this was a great question as well from our Facebook group, the HerbRally Facebook group. With modern research always expanding and new drugs coming out on the scene, how do you keep up to date with the latest scientific, nutritional, pharmacological, and herbal information?
Okay. Well, this is a really great question. I think one of the things that I have done is I have subscribed to newsletters of several journals that I follow, including the Journal of the American Medical Association. They do send really wonderful sort of overviews and about like things that are being newly published and whatnot. And so I highly recommend finding some high quality journals. And again, this is high quality is a whole can of worms that I also teach about in my Demystifying Scientific Research series, which you can actually access if you're an HPX. I'm just going to stop plugging myself now. Alex already knows. And so, I think, I think what's easiest for me, because I don't have time to go like, okay, today I'm going to search on PubMed, for whatever. I mean, I don't tend to have that kind of time. But I do appreciate getting these sort of dossiers that come through from several journals that I follow. So I can kind of look and see what's coming on the pipeline. When it comes to herbal research, in particular, scientific research into plants and to herbs, the majority of it, I'm just going to say this. I mean, someone might pin me to the wall and beat me later, but most of it's crap. And most of it's crap because we're looking at preclinical studies here that are, in vitro or in vivo animal studies that lack clinical relevance. They don't tell us very much at all about how plants work in bodies. And so I tend to not the sense that I don't look, but it's more, I don't give a lot of weight to a lot of research that comes out on herbs. Now, there are, less so because, unless you're a private nutraceutical company that has money to fund a clinical trial, there's not a lot of clinical trials either coming down the pipeline that are focused specifically on the practice of herbalism. Usually they're about a supplement that's being made, and the end number is like the number of participants is very small, like 10 or 20. And so the study doesn't have a lot of power as far as its statistical, when I'm talking about statistical power, not like Popeye power. And so, again, it's very difficult for me to be on the receiving end of a bunch of garbage and have to whittle through it. I just don't have that time and space. So I tend to be a little bit more proactive in, just allowing those newsletters to come through from the journals, looking and seeing what's kind of new coming down the pipeline. If it seems interesting, checking it out. If not, delete. And that's kind of how I keep track of things. I guess that's it. Yeah.
Totally. So Julia, correct me if I'm wrong. Julia has maybe a follow-up question. What herbal books would you recommend to help me get started on that end?
On the research end or just in general or?
Yeah, let's see.
Both.
Both.
Okay. So I feel like I've got a few really classic books that I definitely have loved. I've loved deeply. And the one is actually called, I don't think it's in print anymore. It's harder to find. But it's The Essential Book of Herbal Medicine by Simon Mills. He's a colleague of mine with the National Institute of Medical Herbalists, and has done a lot of work with Carrie Bone, who is also NIM. And so the other book that I would recommend is oh my goodness, Medical Herbalism. Nope, that's not the right one. Okay, now I'm on the spot. I can't remember the name of the book. It's Mills and Bone, and that's kind of looking more at the sort of pharmacology and overview of current scientific research. And they do a really good job of taking everything with a grain of salt. Yeah, Mills and Bone, Julia, Mills and Bone. And then Simon Mills' book, I'm talking up Simon Mills right now. Nothing to disclose. His Essential Book of Herbal Medicine was written a really long time ago, but for me, it definitely set the precedent of a mindset of how we use plants to support the body. And it's a really good, super interesting read. So those maybe would be a couple that I would suggest. I think there's a lot of herbalism books out there that are really amazing. Like Krista's new book, for example. Well, it's newish. That is incredible tome that she wrote. My gosh. And maybe you can put some info about that, into the chat or into the notes or something like that. I really enjoyed her work. There was another book that came out, was kind of edited by and written by a bunch of UK herbalists, called The Western Herbal Tradition. And the Western Herbal Tradition, it's was my thesis advisor, Graham Tobin, who is a sort of an expert in medical astrology and the work of Nicholas Culpeper, and Allison Denham and Margaret Whiteleg, and they wrote that. That's a really good one as well. But I do feel like there's a lot of herbal books that are sort of there. A lot of them are the same, as far as like, a regurgitation of information in a different format. And then of course we have this whole AI thing that's happening now, where we've got robots writing herbalism. So, but I mean, gosh, anything by, let's bless it. Let's just, anything by Rosemary Gladstar is going to be wonderful. I don't know. I could just go on, I suppose. But yeah, I'll stop.
That's a good starting point. Lots of books there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll second Christosina Dinas. We have a YouTube video where we essentially interview her about the whole book. And she goes over for like 10 full minutes. So I'll include a link to that in at least the podcast show notes when this is released and whatnot. So this is kind of a broad question.
There's one more. Please. I got one more. The Practicing Herbalist by Margie Flint. I think that's also, she's just republished that one. So I'll just add that to the list.
Well, and she's top of mind because she was also at the Great Lakes Herb Fair.
Yeah. She's amazing. I just love her. Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
So this is kind of a broadish question, but I think you could handle it, Erika. What is your biggest challenge with clients as a clinical herbalist?
Honestly, sugar. I could say that pretty easily. One of my biggest challenges with clients is sugar. Yeah. I think, I will go with that. And I will also say that, making behavioral change is hard. Behavioral change is hard, especially living in, the current state of affairs that we have. We start adding a whole bunch of intersectionality to that bucket, like, economics and race and food deserts and all the other infrastructural nightmares we can think of. Behavioral change is so hard. And the number one issue that I think most of my clients have is, a lifetime of treating the body like crap. And this is with or without underlying genetic disease, or, I was born with this or whatever. Those kinds of things aside, by the time the client arrives, and I work with mostly adults. I do work with some children as well. And unfortunately, they're often at the mercy of their parents' behavioral decisions, right? But, most of the clients that I work with are adults, and they have led a life of, just like me, being totally dissociated from my body, and really just, pelting it with whatever crap I could. And so, we have over time this like experience of really, really deeply embedded habits that are held in place by a very deeply embedded psychology surrounding being in the body. And I think overcoming that dissociation and stepping into relationship with body, even if it's imperfect, you're still trying and working towards that body empathy. I think that is hugely challenging. I mean, that I think is the biggest challenge. And I say sugar because sugar for me is like an archetype of what I'm trying to say. So I don't know, hopefully that answers that question. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I knew that was going to happen to me at least once. Any thoughts on Gillian Stansberry's books?
Oh, they're wonderful. They're wonderful. Yeah, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I was just chatting with.
Just like, I mean, what a work. What a piece of work. That's that was a lifetime right there that was put into making all of that possible. So, yeah, totally. Supporting those books, indeed.
Awesome. Well, should we just do maybe one or two more, or what you think? Sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. This is from Heather Shelton, my homie from Eugene, Oregon. Actually, she also lived in Vermont for a bit. But Heather asks, I would love to ask Erika about her charting practices. How does she take notes and chart? And how does she schedule follow-ups?
Yeah. All right. So this is where I can really, show you the wear and tear on my socks. So I am still very much a paper copy girl. We'll just say the caveat that my systems are requiring an upgrade soon. Finding the time to do that is another story because I'm a one-man show here. But for now, and the way that I've always done things is, I keep all of my notes on paper and in paper files in a filing cabinet. Believe it or not, I know. Like, I'm in the dark ages over here. But I really appreciate this process because, for me, the way that I receive information and then process information is by then externalizing it right away. And I can sit and I can take notes on a piece of paper while I'm still looking at the client, maybe occasionally looking away to make sure I'm not going off the page, where I can maintain rapport. And I can also do this. I'm hearing, I'm processing, I'm externalizing on a piece of paper without, one of the things I can't stand is when I'm working with working with a practitioner, and all you can hear is them typing as you're talking. They're just typing and you're just like, oh my gosh. I mean, there's nothing like, it's awful. I find that awful. So I take all of my notes on paper and I store them on paper, and it's great because you don't get much more HIPAA compliant than just keeping paper copies in a locked filing cabinet. But there is something to say about some of these online electronic medical records, EMR programs. I am in the process of sort of trialing one out at the moment to see, because it handles everything. It's all HIPAA compliant. It handles your onboarding. It handles your scheduling. It handles your invoicing. It handles all of the things. You can store records. You can do, you can do diet diaries and all kinds of other stuff on these online platforms. And all of the information is kind of kept safe and secure on this HIPAA compliant platform, which all seems really lovely. Because currently, my scheduling process is cumbersome for me. And it does take some admin time, where I'm creating the Zoom links and I'm doing the invoicing and I'm sending out links and emails and things like that. And so these electronic medical record systems can be very, very, it can be really great in kind of creating productivity and efficiency in your administrative systems, which is a really good business decision to make. I'm in the process of making it. It's just taking me a long time. So then, scheduling follow-ups really happens for me as a part of, like all of my clients start off on a package. And so their follow-up appointments are built into what the price it is they've already paid or that they're paying at. So they're on a payment plan. And so, by the end of the first session, I will go and I will make sure that we have the next session already booked, and that's a time and a date that works for them. And in that case, I am still using a paper diary, which I carry all over the place with me. I don't even use my phone because I can't protect their information on my phone. I can protect their information in my paper diary, though. So that's currently how I do that. But like I said, my systems are pretty constipated and time consuming and are starting to be a detriment to my productivity. And so I'm looking to upgrade to a less of a paper copy existence. Wish me luck.
Good luck. For some reason that does surprise me. I thought you maybe would have been more on, like, say, the tech side of things, but what you said, it makes perfect sense though. It's so practical, and like, yeah, all of your clients' information is safe and sound. Well, thank you so much, Erika. Why don't we wrap up here?
Okay, great.
Maybe you could give some parting words of advice to those on the fence about becoming a clinical herbalist. It interests them and whatnot, but they're maybe scared of doing it. Or maybe you could just give some parting words of advice. And then, of course, why don't you plug Sovereignty Herbs and Herbal Practice Connection and whatnot?
Okay. Put on the spot about words of advice.
You're so good at it.
I know, right? Okay. So I had a teacher once, one of my teachers, Keith Robertson, say on the very first day of my very first year at the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, he said, "Don't think for once that it is you that have chosen the plants, because it is the plants that have chosen you." And for what that means to me is that, regardless of what you decide to do with plants, like if you let them guide you and let your heart guide you, you're not going to make the wrong call. And if your heart's telling you that you don't really want to work with people, then that's okay, because there's still going to be room out there in the herbalism world for the work that you do want to do with the plants. And there's space for all of us. I also think that I would like to say, for those who are really wanting to work clinically, but are scared, it's okay to be afraid. I totally understand where that's coming from, and I understand how important it is to feel safe in our work in the world. And so what I will say is that after many, many years of clinical herbal practice, I feel very safe. And I feel that I am safe. I feel that my clients are safe, and I feel that my business is safe. And so it is possible. It doesn't have to be scary. You just need to know where the goalposts are. And so you can do it. I believe in you. The world needs more clinical herbalists. The world needs more people working one-on-one with clients. We just do. We just need more people working with plants and people. We just do. And there's enough room for everybody. How many other adages can I add to this?
Well, it was, after seeing Rosemary Gladstar's keynote at the Great Lakes Herb Fair, it's all about, as Jim was saying, cooperation versus competition, collaboration, all the above, So yeah, like you said, community. Yeah, there's all the other C words. There's plenty of room for everybody. Yeah, there is. Okay. Well, then in closing, I'll just plug, if you want to find me, you can find me at sovereigntyherbs.com. We've got this really cool clinical craft series going on right now where, once a month, I'm bringing in teachers to, do an hour and a half long seminar on a really great clinical topic. You can sign up for those individually. You can bundle them together. It's going to be an ongoing schedule. So right now I just have September, which is this week. Actually, we've got Lindsay coming in. September and October up there, but November and December will be up soon. So you can find the clinical craft series on my website there. You can find out more about my herbs and wellness coaching there. And you can also find out more about my mentorship programs. Right now, what's live on my website is the Clinical Foundations Mentorship, which I talked about at the beginning of this webinar. That is fully booked for this year, but will be open again in October, starting October of 2024.
And also to keep your eyes peeled there for the next mentorship program, which is the Business of Clinical Herbal Practice, which launches in March of 2024. And if you just cannot possibly wait to hang out with me again, I would highly recommend that you come and check out the Herbal Practice Connection. That's herbalpracticeconnection.com. That's connection with an X, because X's are cool. And there's just lots of really great stuff going on there all of the time. I think it's a super healthy, wonderful space. And I just absolutely love it. And I will also say too, that I do have a podcast, which I don't think I've published another episode since March or May. No, it's been May, just because I just haven't had the time. So I'm gonna do it again. I just don't, I haven't gotten to the rhythm of it yet, and I'm not quite sure where the next episode's coming out, but you can always subscribe to my podcast on any of those podcast platforms out there. But you can find all of this if you go to sovereigntyherbs.com. Everything is linked, so you can find Herbal Practice Connection and the Herbal Sensorium and all of the good things there.
Do you mind if I read do you mind if I read one of your Herbal Sensorium reviews real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
5 stars, the best of the best. Oh, Erika, how do I love thee? I can never count the ways, but here's a short list. Your wisdom seeps from every cell. You inspire and light the way. Your integrity is impeccable. Your knowledge is rock solid. Folks, if you're interested in herbs and or the practice of clinical herbalism, this podcast will ignite so much inspiration for you. This incredible human makes it also accessible and fun to learn about. I see her as a client and can't say enough good things about the depth of meaningful care she provides in our visits. Dig in and enjoy. Have you read that before?
Oh, my heart is just melting right now.
That's on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, that's an amazing review.
Oh.
And there's a reason we keep having Erika on HerbRally and all different manifestations. It's because we love you, Erika. You do amazing work, and yeah, I really I can't recommend Erika's work enough. So definitely check out Herbal Practice Connection at herbalpracticeconnection with an X.com. All links will be in the the YouTube video and the podcast and show notes and whatnot. So thanks to everyone that showed up live. That was really cool. That's about 5% of the registrants. Like you said, if you register for something, you should show up.
I see you. I see you showing up. Yes.
Yeah, we love it. So
we love it.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks so much, Erika. That was a lot of fun. You brought a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and I'm really excited to publish this. So yeah.
Thank you.
This is great. Yeah.
All right. Lots of love to all you herbies out there.
All right. Well, take care. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, this is Mason with HerbRally. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and also go ahead and subscribe. We come out with new herbal content each and every week. If you didn't know, HerbRally also lists herbalism events. We list herbalism events chronologically. We list them also by state. So you can just go ahead and search by Oregon or Wisconsin or wherever you live. You can find out what herbalism events are happening in your neck of the woods. We also list herbalism events, virtual herbal events. So if you can't make it to an in-person conference or plant walk, we list lots of virtual events as well. To find out more, you could go to herbrally.com/events or herbrally.com/virtual. But if you can help it, I would highly recommend trying to go to an herbalism conference. Those are some of the best learning experiences I've ever had, and that's where you can find different herbal teachers, and then maybe you could perhaps take their apprenticeship. But yeah, just do what you can. Get out there and learn about the herbs, like yarrow, dandelion, corn, all the above, like all the medicinal herbs. And we'll see you out there. Hope to see you at an herb conference. All right, bye.